Hey there, and welcome to Work Dope, a podcast on the messiness and the potential of humans at work. I'm Linda Stacy, and I'm a corporate sellout, but I'm also a corporate innovator, and I'm focused on this disconnect between what we hope work could be and what it actually is most days. There is so much potential for humans in the workplace, but it's often occluded by this necessary messiness of humans and a lack of usable tools to help us navigate. WorkDope is on a mission to help reinvent the work experience and is committed to bringing insights, tools, and inspiration to employees at all levels of the organization. Special place in my heart for those individual contributors. I want to apologize for being MIA for a bit, and in fact, this episode was recorded a few weeks ago now. I recently took on a new role at work around February 1st. Then I was on vacation. And then I had the opportunity to do a TED Talk in April. I will include the link to the TED. It will be on the TED site in the coming weeks, but right now I have a link to it from YouTube that I can share and will share in the notes. Overall, indeed, this energy has been directed towards other things, and I really am missing recording and being here on the podcast. So in this episode, I spoke with Thom Kafzizi. Thom works in IFS, which is Internal Family Systems. So he is an IFS trauma-informed practitioner and executive coach. He's an organizational psychology practitioner and a certified psychedelic integration coach. Everything that he does is focused on developing humans. Internal family systems might be something you haven't heard about. It's a little bit complex to understand at first. I do go in some explanation right at the beginning. I'm hoping that you'll stick with it and potentially look up Dick Schwartz, who is the person who founded IFS almost 40 years ago. If you saw the movie Inside Out, it's based on many of the concepts of IFS. This little girl in Inside Out, it's a Pixar movie. She's moving across the country. Her life kind of gets turned upside down. What seemed to be an idyllic childhood begins to change as she's experiencing really uncomfortable things that happen to all of us in life. And of course, it's beautifully played out in the movie when she's got these various characters in her brain helping her to navigate. So all of these various characters are helping us navigate in the workplace, and sometimes they're not demonstrating themselves in the best ways at work. So IFS is about understanding this, and it's about learning about ourselves so that we can really operate from the most essential, best part of self. That's how Dick Schwartz calls it. It's our self. It's our core being. So these tools within IFS and WorkDope more broadly, they're all meant to inspire thought, new ways to navigate, new ways to grow, and to really take advantage of this dynamic life. Just take life by the reins and serve and bring people up, bring ourselves up, and make the most of it. Enjoy the episode. Good morning, Thom. I am thrilled to have you on WorkDope today. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful and so happy to be here.
Yeah, I am thrilled to have you. We are talking about internal family systems today, a very interesting, and I'm going to say complex concept, ideas. And unlike many of my other podcasts where I feel like we can just jump right in, I do want to frame this up a little bit. But first, let's just say, where are you geographically in the world today? And if you can, if you have like a little tiny nugget that you give people when they ask you what you do, what do you tell them?
Yeah, so I'm in sunny South Florida, and it's nice, beautiful weather because it's almost springtime here, right? So it's beautiful, not quite so hot.
Mhm.
And when I talk to people about what I do, depends on the person and what they're looking for. But I think holistically, it's really helping individuals to be the best version of themselves and focus mostly on behaviors and how they're interacting with the world around them and others around them.
Yeah, that interacting with humans is a very common theme here on Work Dope. So internal family systems, again, I would just want to give a little bit of background and history and invite Thom, you to, sprinkle in whatever you want, interrupt me. That's totally fine. As I understand it in the research and the looking around online of what I know of this is that its roots are in therapy and the psychology type of world. Dick Schwartz, about 40 years ago, began to understand. So Richard Schwartz, if anyone wants to look this up, began to understand how people that he was treating in a research study that he was doing were interacting kind of with their internal voices. I mean, that's one way that we can begin to talk about this. He was working specifically with patients, bulimic patients, and working with their families. And systems psychology was one of the rages of the day. And you would see how a child would react. I mean, a child, it could be a grown child, but based on parental interaction, who's present in the room, that the kids would kind of react differently if mom was there, and if maybe we could get mom to go outside, that something else might be allowed. Well, then Dick was beginning to realize that these also were happening inside of our heads, that we have these different parts of us that kind of can get in the way. So someone who suffers from bulimia, for example, knows there's a part of them that doesn't want to binge and purge, and there's another part potentially that can't seem to override those passages, the other messages. So I personally was introduced to these concepts in 2017, 2018. I have had some therapeutic-like interaction with the way that this therapy or coaching, or what would you call it? Is it a methodology, a healing system, a modality, I guess is what it's called, right?
Modality, philosophy, even.
Yeah.
Dick does very well about saying that while this was birthed in the realm of therapy, it expands to coaching. I'm a therapist, I'm a coach, and make it very clear, I'm not operating or giving any of this information from a therapeutic perspective, right? But that it also is a way of life. He wants this to extend as to becoming a way of life. And so it has expanded beyond the therapy room.
Yeah, and it's fantastic. So people are getting certified in this modality from all different types of professions, and it's awesome that the programs are so full and that so many people have interest in this. But anyway, we can talk about that some more too. But I also thought I would couch this in the movie Inside Out. Really, these themes come to life. And this is a little girl. If you haven't seen it, audience members, I recommend going and watching Inside Out. It's a Pixar Disney movie. And this little girl who moves across the country, and we see her mental activity played out. And it is so enjoyable to watch these different characters in her brain: joy, anger, fear, sadness, and disgust. And the way that all those parts have their place, you realize by the end of the movie how important each one of those is. And the moral of the story, again, that pulling these all together creates the healthy system, the healthy human system. And so that, again, couching all of this together, this is interesting. I just asking you now about this. In the movie, some of her core memories begin to kind of corrode. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
What's the analogy there in terms of what's happening as we live our life and things happen? She was beginning to experience trauma, right? Like she was having these very dramatic things happen, crying in the classroom on her first day of school, having a terrible hockey experience. And these core things begin to kind of crumble from her, what seemed to be a pretty healthy start anyway.
Yeah. Well, what comes up for me around that is those things like crying in the classroom and having that bad hockey moment really were the parts coming forward based on the trauma. We'll use that word, right? For us as an adult, we might look at a move as being a very small T trauma, and we're just making a move.
Yeah.
But for her, as that little girl, that was a big T trauma for her. Like she was leaving things behind, and so it was just abruptly moving to this other place. And as a result of that, her parts didn't know what to do, and they started interacting with her and interacting with the world in such a way, crying in the classroom and the other things that you see throughout the movie. I think an answer to your question with the memories is like we can have so many beautiful memories from our childhood, and yet when trauma enters the picture, and that trauma could even be something as little as having bad interactions when we enter our school days, right? We enter the school system, and we all know that there's bullying, and we're comparing ourselves to one another, and that can be traumatic, and that begins to push those beautiful memories out of the way, and then those traumatic memories begin to come to the front of the stage, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are a few things that we've set up at the outset here. And of course, I'm interested in understanding how this modality and how this knowledge and this viewpoint, this philosophy can impact us in the workplace when we have various behaviors playing out and what's happening as it relates to our parts.
Mhm.
So this is a broad, open-ended question, and I want your take on generally themes that are happening in the workplace with people such that the work around IFS is needed and important. Just general themes of interpersonal relationships and maybe even the extent to which you help specific types of people in organizations.
Mhm. You know, as you asked me that question, there's two things that come to mind immediately, and that is the relationship between a leader and their employees.
Mhm.
And so I would love to be able to say that all leaders are great and they're self-led and they're empathetic and compassionate and those types of things, but we know that's not the reality in a lot of cases. As we're seeing that people don't feel valued in the jobs that they do. And so I think the first thing that comes to mind is that relationship between manager and employee.
Mhm.
And while I think traditionally we all think though it's a manager and employee, it's just these two people. So not true,
Mm.
because most of our interactions between manager and employee, or with each other for that matter, across the board, is having part to part relationships. So
Mhm.
the parts are working with one another, and that's why we begin to get tension in the relationships, or we don't feel valued because our parts want and need something, and
Mhm.
they don't know how to ask for it.
Mm.
And so self at that point in time is being occluded in the picture. And so most of the interactions that the leader and the manager are having are part to part relationships. And if you will, I just got a visual of you've got two people who really can't see each other
Mhm.
communicating with each other
Right.
and not having a language to be able to ask for what they need.
Yeah, and I think it can be helpful to think of an interpersonal relationship with a spouse or a significant other. I think it can help a little bit to frame this. I think we all have this experience of, what is going on with them right now? Like you recognize that this is not how they all are all the time. Hopefully you wouldn't have chosen that person if that part was out all the time and making things disturbing. But we can definitely recognize, oh, someone's got something going on. And of course, there's the potential that a part of us is reacting specifically to a part of them. It gets very, very complex. But I just wanted to put that out there that I think we can all recognize that there are times that when we as individuals are reacting in ways that we don't quite get, we don't really know where it's coming from. And we also know that sometimes people that we're interacting with seem to be really kind of, I mean, we'll use the word triggered, but use whatever word you want. They're kind of flipped on. Something has switched, and we're noticing some different types of behavior.
Yeah. Well, I love the example of the relationship that you just mentioned. So if we think of that interpersonally, and I'll use a personal example that I think will demonstrate that. Um, my significant other would typically leaves things in the kitchen sink. And so there's a part of me that interprets that as this he's doing something to me.
Right.
Like, why is he doing that to me? Why is he leaving those things? He knows it bothers me. So it's
Mhm.
like you do that to me.
Mhm.
And what I'm unaware of, and what we've together in our relationship have done IFS work together, I now know that that's not even conscious for him, that it's
Right.
bothering me. It's just that a part of his is so uber focused on something else
Right.
that he himself is even unaware of the impact that he's having by putting the dishes in the sink versus the dishwasher.
Right.
And so I can look at him and say, he's not just that person who leaves things in the sink. He's
Right.
that in so many other things that I can tend to lose sight of in the
Right.
moment when I'm triggered about the dishes.
Right. Yes, absolutely. I think we could all identify with all of some aspect of that. Each of us is one of those people.
Yeah, yeah, in
um,
some.
so you were saying, just getting back to like two people in the workplace who are part to part, like maybe a triggered part is interacting with another triggered part, and this issue of not asking or not knowing maybe even what they need. Like, can you say more about that?
Yeah, like oftentimes those parts are just playing strategies and tactics that have worked for them in the past when they were much younger, their
Mhm.
much younger selves, and they fail to realize in many cases that even the person that they inhabit is in their 40s and 50s. They're
Yeah.
still behaving like they're 13 on
Right.
the yard or, playing with their friends or fighting with their friends, if you will, like in the backyard. And so they're unaware that time has passed. And so they're playing these strategies blindly, just hoping that strategy will work and that they'll get what they're needing, but they're not asking for what they need because they never knew how to do that.
Yeah, this is huge. And it's come up so many other times in work dope that it's not knowing how, but maybe not even knowing what the need is or what's kind of disturbing them. Like what is being rubbed here? So the work of IFS is hopefully also getting at the need and being able to articulate. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, and that's like, and of course that's a much longer conversation
Yeah.
too, that more than we have time for. But it really starts with the self of the person, that unblemished core person that's there. I call it the conductor, and I think of it like an orchestra, right? So the conductor, who is supposed to be the one who is caring for the members of the orchestra, the ones who's supposed to call them in when they're needed and help them to relax back when they're not needed. It even feels better when you think of it that way.
Mm-hmm.
But but what we see there is that the conductor has been pushed away. And so what this work does is it brings the conductor back into the center. And before those parts can begin to ask what they need for externally, self begins to work with those parts to even for it to get to know the part. And the part even learns about themselves by interacting with that conductor.
Mm, mm.
Then they be, that's why I behave that way, because they're stuck in this loop that's back in time, and they
Right.
don't realize that they're stuck in that loop and playing the same old strategies that are no longer needed.
Yeah. So if and when the conductor is in the forefront,
Mm.
the concepts around IFS talk about 8 C's that
Mhm.
are that I love that Dick Schwartz calls itself leadership, because that's been one of my phrases for the last several years, that everything that I talk about it is around, you know, doing your best for yourself, from yourself. And so those C's, I know compassion, confidence, those ones come to me right at the outset. I won't really make you rattle them off, but I don't
Oh
think
no,
I.
I can rattle them
Oh,
off.
go do it.
And I think if we rattle them off, and if you just think about when as I'm saying them, think about leaders and
Yeah.
organizations, and you can even just anecdotally see that they're missing
Yeah.
in corporate America. And so it's compassion, curiosity, courage, clarity, creativity, connectedness, confidence, and calm.
Mm.
Now, we see a lot of courage and confidence in
Mm.
organizations, right? But I think those come from more of a place of like type A personalities, if you
Right.
will, which
Right.
is, and any of these, if overdone, right, aren't healthy. But when they're in balance, they can be so beautiful. And think about the culture of organizations that could really cultivate.
Yeah. Yeah. So these 8 C's, I think curiosity and compassion are 2 that I feel individual contributors need to feel more of. I
Mhm.
think that individual contributors can also extend that more and be more self-led if they want to feel more confident and more self-assured and more valued in the workplace. So it goes both ways, that, the leader exuding this, but also the individual contributors being conscious of their own ownership of some of these, and are we being curious? I think a lot of times individual contributors are assuming like nefarious, like that all the bosses are in a room coming up with a scheme to make their lives miserable or something like that. How can we be curious and create different stories? It's also
We
fascinating.
make so much stuff up, right? I mean,
Yeah.
in absence of like, we're like our parts are what fill in those gaps, and they're always going to go to the most extreme
Yeah.
negative intentions, because that's what they picked up through their childhood, through
Right.
their attachment injuries, if you will, or
Right.
those types of things. Talking about the compassion and curiosity, I love that you mentioned it's a two-way street.
Yeah.
And I think that the conduit for both of those to be present is that one of those 8 C's of connectedness. If
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel a sense of connectedness and belonging, then
Mm-hmm.
compassion and curiosity can't rise to the surface.
Yeah. Yeah. With all of this, I'm just thinking that if an individual is in a triggered state, whether it's the leader or the individual contributor, they're not going to be able to hear feedback. They're not going to be able to perform well. It's
Mm.
just really going to limit forward progress. And there's a little bit of work to be done, I think, cultivating a sense of the calm was one of the C's. And I believe that everyone in the organization could be looking to reassure or to help others kind of relax the protectors. Is this making
Yeah.
sense? You mentioned in our prior conversation how when you're dealing with a leader that you might have several sessions where you're just getting to know a specific part, like that there could be a lot of triggered. Anyway, I'll let you talk about that. You
Well,
were
I
going to.
think I love that you said that, and I think several might even be an understatement. Like
Yeah.
depending upon the parts, it could be many, many, many sessions to get to know that part because the thing is that the parts have to begin to trust the self of the leader. And for so long, self's been occluded. It's been pushed back because those parts have been running the show. And so when self tries to come forward, oftentimes the parts actually kind of rage up and go, nope, you haven't been here all these years. So why should I trust you now? And so a lot of those coaching sessions are really about helping the parts feel heard, be seen, tell their story, and allow self to kind of acknowledge that they weren't there, but that they're there now. And I'm here for you. And to be able to help heal and unburden that part so it can let go of that old nasty job, that tiring job it's been doing for so long, and take a new job in the system that's more aligned with what they want to be doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I'm experiencing that in my own personal life and growth around IFS right now. But do you have an example that you could share, someone that you've worked with or archetype that you've worked with in terms of maybe a common part type and what can happen through the transformation of this work?
Yeah. So the one that comes to mind is I worked with an individual who we were called in to coach because this leader tended to take everything and do it herself. And so her team members felt as though they weren't even needed on the team. She always was the smartest person in the room, always said, I've got this handled. And so there was a lack of bench strength. There was no successor. And quite frankly, the person was coming across very abrasively into people feeling that they weren't important on the team or valued, like they were not needed, but
Mm-hmm.
yet they were there.
Mm-hmm.
And then so when we began to work together and self of that person began to explore the parts of the system, we found where that came from. And so for this leader, the part was able to tell the story about, well, my father died very early. I think the person might have been 12 or 13. So
Mm-hmm.
think about that age in comparison to what I'm in relation to what I'm going to tell you. And the father was a business owner,
Mm-hmm.
a global business, small, but still global. This 13-year-old was an only child
Mm-hmm.
and had to step up to care for her mother, but also started filling in for the business and to keep the business moving and continue to do through her high school years and into her first years of college. So that's a heavy responsibility for a 13-year-old to take on.
Yeah.
So the 13-year-old knew it needed to do those things to keep the family going and to keep themselves protected.
Yeah.
And so now you fast forward to the person being a 40-year-old, and that 13-year-old part is still running the show.
Yeah.
Wait, nope, step back. I've got it all. I can handle this. I can do all of this. I don't need anybody else.
Yeah.
I don't need anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And so that had significant impact on the team.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had to do a lot of work with that person around helping that part to relax back. And it took almost a year
Yeah.
of working with this person just to get them to a point where they had a modicum of ability to be able to allow that part to relax back. Still not perfect, but
Mm-hmm.
even a 20% shift was felt by the team.
Oh, that's awesome. So the idea and the philosophy here, the understanding around IFS is that part is kind of overextending in a way that ends up being not healthy, and that once the work is done and the story done, it's never done, right? But once the story is expressed, the part can take on a new role
Yes.
or a maybe a more integrated role? Like, what would be the like an awesome outcome now or transformation for this woman in terms of how that part can now behave and interact in the world?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could say I knew exactly what she did too, right?
No
Because she
worries.
ended up moving on to another job and another company and things like
Yeah,
that. So I didn't get to follow through on her journey all the way. But I could probably use myself as a better example
sure.
for like how a part can take on a new role.
Mhm.
I had a part, and I'm sure nobody else has these parts or has this part, but I had a part that as my business began to grow and scale, this part that holds imposter syndrome came forward, and it was kind of debilitating to the point where there were days I would sit here and stare at my computer and be like, "Ugh, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do?" And then through the work that I did through internal family systems, realized that part that held the imposter syndrome actually was triggered and it had been handled from the past, but it was re-triggered by an instance in my professional trajectory where I worked for a really, really toxic leader.
Mm.
And I won't get into the details, but what that leader did to me and the organization, I ended up leaving as a result of it, but it really brought all of that trauma from the past back to the current.
Mm.
And so I worked with my IFS therapist and did some IFS coaching and did those types of things. And long story short, as I got that part to be able to relax back and help it to realize that this new triggering event wasn't about that part being not good enough and not worthy to take the stage in this job or in this role and in this company. It was more about the other person,
Mm.
that they were putting their trauma onto us, and that we didn't have to accept that, and that I could take care of this part,
Mm.
that I could love it the way it needed to be loved. I could give it the assurance that it needed rather than it taking the message from this toxic leader we were working for. Through the work that we did on that, that part began to relax back. And then eventually I got to the point and I said, so you no longer have to do this role
Mm.
that you're doing. You
Mhm.
no longer have to keep us playing small for fear that we're going to be perceived as incompetent or an imposter. You don't have to do that anymore. What would you rather be doing in this system? And this part said, I just want to go back to playing the piano
Mm.
and listening to music and making music that we did for so many years of our early years.
Mm.
And it wasn't until that moment, Linda, that I even realized I'd stopped playing the piano for 5, 6 years. Didn't even realize that the dust was accumulating on the piano, and that,
Interesting.
gosh, that job of that part was always to just be musical and to be able to settle and transcend through music.
Mm.
And for 5 years, that bad instance, that triggering instance with that toxic leader took all that away and put
Interesting.
that part back into a trauma loop where it was having to interact with the world that way.
That's really fascinating. I'm gonna have to go back and like contemplate on it a little bit, and I will share a little bit about what's happening in my work around this right now. Is I have a part, or it might be a combination of parts, that's constantly scanning the environment for kind of like the emotional pulse of
Mhm.
what's going on. And I think this has to do with my place in the family, being the youngest of four, feeling like resources weren't always fantastic. And I would say financial and other resources, where like, what were the parents doing? Like, I a lot of memories of kind of like, where are, like, I feel like no one's around, that kind of thing. So kind of this scanning energy, and uh, being that way for so many years, you do develop some skills around understanding that something's going on for someone, and I might have that before other people realize it.
Mm.
And I'm getting to the point where I'm understanding that there's energy there that can be used in very positive ways, instead of all this energy that I've been spending in the past scanning to protect. What's the threat? Who's got a problem? Like, how am I going to have to deal with this? Who's going to be draining me? Like, that's the energy that has been kind of the part in kind of an exacerbated way that it has not been helpful. But it's interesting to see the transformation. And I feel like this part is kind of like leaning in and curious right now. I'm not sure where we're going to end up with it, but I'm curious to how can this energy be used for the benefit of all the humans that I interact with, or that are in my larger
Yeah.
world.
Well, Linda, I'm curious too, because I mean, I have parts that are making assumptions about that, but I'm curious about like, is that scanning too? Is it so that you can be responsive, or that that part can be responsive? It sounds like there, I was feeling that there's an essence of like responsiveness that's needed.
Do you
Yeah.
mean like a pressure to respond, or a, yeah, I think that I'm not sure yet. I don't know. I think there's a pressure to protect, and there's a lot of draining, like a lot of energy drain in that. And I think what I'm
Mm.
realizing now is that I have resources. I don't need to be so protective, and that has lifted some of the heaviness around it.
I like that you said the energy drain, because these parts that are doing there, when we feel tired at the end of the day,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it can be because we've done a lot of work and we've stayed up late, those types of things. But oftentimes when we feel drained at the end of the day, it's because our parts are drained. And like
Absolutely.
you mentioned, that part that's always scanning the environment.
Right.
Oftentimes when we've unburdened that part, even when we ask them, what other role would you like to take in this system? Many times, I would say most times, what I hear from my clients' parts is they're like, thanks for asking. Can I just go relax somewhere? I
Yeah.
don't really want to do any role right now, because guess what? I've been doing it for the last 40, and I just need a short, brief respite
Yeah.
before we talk about what new role I want to take on.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm immediately thinking of like an employee who's had some kind of behavior that may not have been helpful. And can we, as a leader or a coworker, recognize it or be curious about it in the other person in a way that is non-threatening, that helps them to relax or helps them to use that energy in a different way?
Yeah, well, that's when we know we're in self energy, because you just said, "Can I be curious about that?" I mean, I think that's the main thing we know it's missing, right? Well, we look at the behavior and we're like, "Oh, that's a really bad behavior," but can I be curious about what's underneath that? Because
Right.
typically, what's underneath that is a fear that I need to understand
Yeah.
and might be able to respond to.
Hmm. Yeah, I was just thinking about if you're in a moment where you need to give someone feedback, and I've read so much about feedback, and that the person giving it, if they can start with questions to have the other person get reflective, I think even that can sometimes feel like they go into a protective state. The energy around the question, is the question leading in some way, or is it really a true openness to
Yeah.
what happened here and
Or
how
does
can
it feel
I?
like an inquisition, right? It's like this.
Exactly.
I can say that and it's probably because I'm a coach and I was also a leader after receiving coaching training. I think for me, even like in the feedback realm, I always started off by saying, so just want to have a feedback conversation. But before we begin, I just want to check in and say, how do you best like to receive feedback?
Mm,
Like, it's just as difficult for me to deliver feedback.
hmm.
And I know it might be difficult to receive. So how do you want me to
Hmm.
deliver this feedback? What's
Hmm.
worked for you in the past? What hasn't worked for you in the past? And then I can meet the needs of that person. It's not
Hmm.
about me. At the end of the
Hmm.
day, I need them to receive that feedback in a way that's going to keep them being productive and help them also feel like they're connected and that they
Hmm.
feel heard and seen.
Hmm.
And sometimes those inquisitions, those questions aren't going to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. You're the second person who's recommended that. Yeah. How do you asking how you like to receive feedback? I wonder if folks have ever given it much thought, or maybe they even need some time to think about that,
Yes.
because they may not have, it might not have ever been considered. I have the sense that some people might like to be able to digest, perhaps even, like we're going to have a session. I'm going to be giving some feedback. I don't expect anything from you in this moment. We'll talk about it in a couple of days. Do you have a sense of what some of the various options for feedback settings could be? How people
Well, I
like
mean,
to receive?
some people, I've heard some of my employees even in the past have said there are certain behavioral personality styles, right? That just want you to be direct. They don't want the sugarcoating. They just
Mm,
want you just tell me be direct about the feedback. Tell me what you want. I've got it and I'll move on.
mm,
That's one group, right, of individuals. There's others that want to feel like you see them, they feel heard. You're going
mhm,
to allow them to also, be in dialogue with you over this,
mhm.
so you can both explore the realities of the situation, because
Yeah,
rarely do we have all the information when we go in
right.
conversations. So I think those are the two extremes that
Yeah.
I
Okay.
really leaning into and really being aware of the relationship, and enhancing that person's self-esteem through the conversation, I think
Yeah.
is really important, and that they
Hmm.
feel heard. Now, the other
Yeah.
side of the coin is there are some who don't want to have a dialogue. They just say, tell me what to fix, I'll fix it, and we're good. And they just walk out.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been in situations where I feel like the person receiving feedback might want to undermine the person. They want to undermine the self-confidence. You were just suggesting that if you're giving feedback, you're holding them up through the process,
Yes.
right? You're maintaining a mutual respect and such. And you might not always get that back.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think it depends on, as a leader, what's my agenda going into this conversation? Is it to prove that I'm right and that person was wrong? Or is it really going in with an agenda of how can we together create a solution
Mhm.
that's beneficial for both of us plus the team?
Mm.
But many times I think there are some leaders who go in with an agenda of this is just me holding my positional authority to tell you where you messed up and where you
Wow.
need to do different. So they need to check themselves. I
Yeah.
always tell my executive coaching clients, and my team does as well, never wing those conversations. All
Mm.
those conversations need to be thoughtfully planned and go in with a specific intention,
Mm.
and you wrap everything you do around that intention. And then
Mm.
if your intention is to prove that person wrong and keep them
Mm.
down where you in the
Mhm.
hierarchical type of thing, right?
Right.
I'm here and you're down here. If that's your intention, it's never going to have the outcome you're looking for.
Mm. Mm.
And
Yeah.
you've triggered all their parts. And by the way, your part is actually running that show too, right? Putting it back on the part, the back, yeah. And yeah. So
It's complicated. It's complicated. So going back a little bit, you mentioned type A before. I like thinking in terms of family dynamics that might lead to type A behavior. And then I'm also going to tie this a little bit. Dick Schwartz talks about his own development and the fact that his father was the way he was, a grandiose person, a lot of demands on his kids, wanting them all to be doctors. And Dick reflects that, he was a Holocaust. That was a result of Holocaust behavior.
yes.
And so sometimes these really, really traumatic experiences launch into very heavy part development, which in some ways leads to on paper success. This man was a well-renowned researcher. It led to some great things for the world. And is there like a paradox there? Like, sometimes when I'm listening to Dick talk about this work or other people talk about this work, it's almost like, well, it's too bad that we have these big T traumas, but look what the result of that can be.
Yeah. There's a duality there. What I find most often is that those individuals are super successful in business. They achieve high levels. And if you peel away the onion, you realize that that's at the expense of many, if not all, other things.
Mm-hmm.
Their
Mm-hmm.
relationships are typically not in a good place. They don't have connectedness with their children. It's a lonely place. It's a lonely
Mm-hmm.
place. But even
Mm-hmm.
though the people that are, because even though they may have lots of people around them, those individuals are wanting something,
Mm-hmm.
not really connectedness with the person.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so it can be a very lonely place, a very
Mm-hmm.
lonely place. And typically in that type A personality, so let's start by just saying also all parts, even if their tactics aren't working any longer, they all have a positive intent for protection or achieving what they need to do to feel protected and safe and secure, like that lower level of Maslow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is
Mm-hmm.
that security piece. And what we know is that more what my experience has been is that type A personalities are mostly always parts driven, not self-driven.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if we think of the type B personality, they have a lot more of those characteristics of self, those 8 C's that we talked about
Mm-hmm.
have a lot more of those characteristics. And
Mm-hmm.
so we're never always self-led. None of us can be self-led 100% of our time of the time of the day. However, they're more self-led than the type A personality.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I haven't done a lot of looking around at the type B personality. Is
Like they're more imaginative, they're more creative, they're more friendly, they're inspiring,
Mhm.
they're more curious. They're those characteristics. They're
Right.
more people-centered
Right.
versus achievement and task focused.
Right. Right. I mean, both parts are good. I mean, we still need to have the task orientation and
Yeah.
set out a strategy and all those things. But what's kind of leading? How are we being self-led?
Well, it's like, and to what extreme are those parts operating? Because typically, when it's really parts led, it's to an extreme,
Mm,
to the exclusion of everything else, or almost everything else.
mm,
You know,
right.
and also like one of our earlier conversations, we were talking about, well, where does this come from? Well, it can come from many, many places. But what I'm noticing, and it could be because I'm in Miami, and you know, we have a melting pot here, and so what I find is that that can really be seen not to the exclusion of anything else, but I think it includes the immigrant experience.
Mhm.
And you could be fourth generation,
Yeah.
but that still gets handed down, and
Yeah.
we'll call it a work ethic, you know, type of thing, where you've
Hmm.
always got to be proving yourself and
Right.
showing that you're worthy. And even though I might be a fifth generation from some other country, the fact is that burden of
Hmm.
needing to prove myself has been handed down generation after
Right.
generation after generation. And at some point, we always hear that phrase, I've got to break the chain. I've got to be
Hmm.
the one that kind of
Hmm.
stops and breaks that. Well, the beautiful thing that we do in IFS is being able for me to realize that that burden of needing to prove myself may have belonged to my great great grandfather.
Right.
And so I can actually hand that back and free up myself and my parts from that and say, this belongs to someone else,
Yeah.
not to me.
Right. Right. And when we think about this, even the example I was giving before with Dick Schwartz's father and the Holocaust, and I think too of most of our generation's parents and World War II and World War I and their parents, depression, all of these things absolutely inform how we were raised, our circumstance, our conditioning, the types of messages that were sent. I personally got my first job when I was 14 because I had no spending cash because it just wasn't a thing in our family. And I wanted to buy clothes. I mean, that was my motivator. Growing up in Southern California, you had to look a certain way and I was going to work for it. And I don't think that was a bad thing. That's me going back to it's not a bad thing. It's
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, even our parts that may be demonstrating some of these behaviors or some of these tactics that are not productive for us. And I think this is really what's super important, because there's some schools of thought out there that will say this part is the critic. This part is this. None of us and no part of us is just one thing. They're not defined by their behavior.
Mm. Hmm.
You know, they're not defined by they're so much more than that, and they hold valuable skill sets and valuable talents
Mm.
that we don't even recognize are coming from parts. We just think, oh, it's just me, it's my talent. Well, that talent probably belongs to a part of us,
Mm.
and that part, in addition to having a valuable talent that gets demonstrated, might also hold a burden that's causing some unproductive behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
Just like
Mm-hmm.
our employees, we can have an employee that's phenomenal at some certain things, but there's just this one thing
Right.
that's discounting their talent.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And then we go back to the feedback and the graceful ability to call that forward. And indeed, indeed. So I want to bring into this, you work with psychedelics too. And I want to know, to the extent that these things are connected, your work with IFS and leaders, is it? I don't know. I know that Tim Ferriss talks about psychedelics quite a bit, and I've heard it in but other contexts, but it's not something I have really dug into.
Yeah.
And just curious to know what you would share in general.
Yeah, I think the beautiful intersection between internal family system and psychedelics is there comes a time potentially when in the IFS work where you hit that ceiling and you're kind of like, there's something else there, but the protective system is so strongly entrenched, you just can't break through.
Okay.
And so you can do all the curiosity, and you can do all the IFS, go in the whole internal journey. And then there's just something there, but you just can't kind of put your finger on.
Hmm.
And so the beauty with the psychedelics intersecting this is that it allows that default mode network, that prefrontal cortex, it just kind of puts that down for a nap. And by putting that down for a nap, by the way, that's where the protective system is operating from. That's the part that's scanning, and being really logical and shutting all these other parts of our brain down. But what is beautiful about that is it puts that down for a nap and allows the other parts of our brain to release memories and to be able to encounter things and experience parts that were being exiled or parts that were being pushed back and not heard. And so by the release of those memories and allowing for that connection, we can continue the healing path doing more IFS, because those parts were allowed to finally be seen by allowing some of those other parts to kind of relax back. I always say we're going to put them down for a nap. They're not going to be asleep. They're going to be experiencing this and seeing what's happening, but they're not going to get in the way.
Is there any danger around this? Would there be an influx or I don't even know what to call that, of old stuff flooding back such that it could be really harmful for a human?
Yeah, absolutely it can be. And so that's why, like for me, at least in my practice, I don't provide the psychedelics because we know the legal landscape, it's illegal, it's moving and shifting. So in many cases, I'll recommend for individuals to go, like, say, to Costa Rica, Mexico, Jamaica, areas where they have the ability to do that in a legal way. But even that the case, I'm always doing the preparatory work and really helping them to prep for that journey. And part of that preparatory work is harm reduction. And part of that harm reduction is me helping them to explore their inner system so that they understand the things that potentially can come up in that journey, and not allowing that journey to take place until we feel comfortable that all the parts are comfortable also with taking that journey. That's part of that preparation and harm reduction.
Awesome.
I think the danger, Linda, to your question, I think the danger is when individuals are out there and they've heard, oh, psilocybin can help me with my depression or my anxiety, because it's out there in the news. And so they hear that and they know a friend who says, hey, I can get you some mushrooms. And they do this not in the proper setting, without the proper preparation and without the proper mindset. And that's when we'll hear people go, oh, I had a bad trip. Well, there's no such thing as a bad trip, because we believe the medicine shows you what you need to see. The bad part of it is you put yourself in a situation, in a setting that wasn't safe, it wasn't controlled, and you didn't do the proper prep work. But it's beautiful. I can tell you, when I was in Costa Rica with one of my journeys, there were 4 parts I had been working with and very well aware of them. And there was a part in the journey where these 4 parts presented themselves to me in that psychedelic journey. And I was moving some energy and trauma through by doing some yoga moves and some things while I was on the medicine. And I looked up at them and they were just like wide-eyed and just looking. And I'm like, I remember saying to them, this is for you. I'm moving this energy, this trauma energy, I'm moving it out of me, but this is for you. And I still get emotional when I think about it. Those 4 individuals, those 4 parts came and laid on my chest during that journey and cried and said, thank you so much for loving us. And thank you so much for doing this for us to release this energy. That was so beautiful. Their previous impact that wasn't productive in our lives, just spontaneously left, and those habits have not returned.
Yeah, that's the part that's really compelling. I think from my, from where I sit with all of this, that is really, that's transformation, right? And
it's a beautiful marriage between the two things. There's IFS and then there's psychedelics. And at the end of the day, indigenous cultures have been using this medicine for centuries. And that's how they healed, and
I had a vision of that as you were describing. I was thinking of someone on a plane in Montana or something, having a multi-day experience. Awesome. I just very quickly before we wrap up, that I'll go to my question that I ask everyone on the podcast around the question of values and being valued in the workplace. And you've naturally, spontaneously mentioned it a few times in this conversation. So I'd like your perspectives on it from you personally, how you've felt valued, maybe how that's changed over your career, and what you think is important for leaders, for individual contributors to understand around what it is to be valued in the workplace. I
I have a
know.
part, I have a part that's laughing and wants to say this one piece around the first thing my message to leaders is get over yourself.
Oh,
It's not all about you. It's
yeah.
not about what you want for yourself. You are
Mhm.
leading an organization full of people.
Mm.
This is my message to leaders is it's not about you. And if it is about you, then you shouldn't be in a leadership position
Mhm.
because you're the conductor of this orchestra. And
Yeah.
if you don't care for those people, you're never going to get, and we're seeing this in the workplace, right? People
Yeah.
leaving bad leaders. We've been seeing this for a while. So it's my message to them is get over yourself. It's not about you.
Mhm.
Check yourself. Check
Mhm.
what your motivations are for that.
Mhm.
But I think holistically in the workplace, I think that it is really about feeling valued is about being seen.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I think that just, and it sounds so trite to say this, being seen encompasses all of these 8 C's of self-leadership.
Mhm.
And that this is what leaders, and this is what you mentioned it earlier, it's a two-way street.
Yeah.
Leaders can begin to practice the 8 C's, but so do our individual contributors,
Yeah.
everybody in the organization. And I go back to saying just what it would look like where everyone would feel valued if we have cultures built on the 8 C's of self-leadership.
Mm. Mhm.
Psychological safety
Right.
would just be it would be part and parcel to the organization, to the culture when you have the 8 C's in practice.
Right. Right. So the 8 C's, I think anyone can read them and go, "Uh-huh, yeah." But without what you said at the outset, without the leader not having that other agenda or thinking that it's about that, I mean, that is critical.
Yeah. Well, that makes me think of the analogy that Dick uses a lot, where, so yeah, we can logically understand the 8 C's, and we could even have a desire to want to really practice and embody those.
Mhm.
In order to embody that, we have to heal the parts of us. Dick uses this analogy of self is the sun, and that we know there are cloudy days, and the parts represent the clouds. And so when they all come in, they obscure the sun. So we have those cloudy days. And so imagine if we had 365 days of working in an organization where it's just cloudy days, cloudy skies, and the
Mhm.
sun never is there.
Mhm.
But when we can begin to heal those parts and work on ourselves, the clouds begin to part and the sun comes back through. That's the
Mhm.
only way we can fully embody the 8 C's is by
Mhm.
doing our self work
Yeah.
so that we can then turn and see one another
Mm.
and
Mm.
value one another.
Yeah. Yeah, that's huge. And I hate to do this right here because it's such a, like a beautiful place to end, but I'm going to do it anyway. I- Being seen, being heard. I too feel like this is critical.
Mhm.
I also, for some reason, the idea of employees venting is coming to mind, and that
Mm.
I've read some places where they're saying that letting someone really go on and on and on is not always a helpful thing. But does some amount of going on and on and on, is some amount of that required to calm the part down? Is this
Yes.
making any sense?
Yes. First of all, when we do the inner work, and you've done some IFS work too, so you know, part of self's job is to hear that part out
Okay.
in any way that it needs to express itself. Because for me to shut it down is just going to re-traumatize that part.
Yeah.
And so that's where calmness on the part of self, I can be calm and sit back. It's not personal. I'm just witnessing that person. I'm witnessing their story. I'm hearing them out and I'm listening
Mm.
with curiosity and compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I'm listening for clarity.
Mm.
It's the request behind the venting.
Mm.
It's the request that that part has. What
Mm.
fear does it have? And then I, as the leader, I can say, how can I help? How can I be supportive? How can I reduce that fear?
Yeah.
And I meet the need of that part so that that venting can actually be released.
Yeah. That's, I think it's beautiful. I think it's a tall order. I mean, don't you think it's a tall order? I mean, there's a
Yeah.
lot of opportunity for the work that you're doing. There are so many people who are so they're not even aware of the work for one thing, but the levels of protection and everything else probably won't let a lot of people even go there to do
Well,
this work.
you're describing the struggle that I have. So like I've put um the straw man together with regards to the program I want to take into corporate America in
Yeah.
relation to internal family systems at
Yeah.
the leader level. And so you're really pointing to the part to the piece of, well, I've got this process, and there's a part maybe that's there, will they let me in?
Yeah.
Are they willing? They're all capable.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a willingness. Are you willing to look
Mm-hmm.
at yourself in order to
Mm-hmm.
be a better leader? Are you willing to look at yourself to be a better employee?
Right.
But we were talking about, I've got to break through those protective systems first.
Yeah.
So, Linda, what I've been doing, my way in the door,
Mm-hmm.
is
Mm-hmm.
that we do a lot of disc work.
Yeah.
And I love what Dick says. No matter what assessment you take, the result that comes out is the way the parts responded. The parts responded to that assessment. And so when I look at DISC now, I look at it and go, oh, they're clustered around D. So what about that keeps them safe, has been rewarded, to the exclusion of these other pieces of the other parts of the DISC map. But it gives me the opportunity on one-on-one debriefs to really explore the parts that are clustered into that D realm.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's explore what's happening to these other parts that you typically would have access to be more relationship centered, more people centered, more empathetic. So it does give me a way in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just now trying to find, how do I marry these two together and get in behind the lines and then really expand this into IFS and organizations.
Yeah. Well, I'm a cheerleader for you. Let me know how I can help. Hopefully this is, I think too, that if there can be little, I don't know what to call them, moles, people in the organizations in various places who are doing it, who have been through programs, that hopefully others might see them and say, what are they doing? What's the elixir? What's the magic that person is showing? You know, that kind of an internal blossoming of the awareness around what it is. And I just have to say too, that a lot of companies manage to make a lot of money without paying attention to their people in the way that we would hope that they would. So as long as that continues to happen, that's part of the reality of this too.
Well, I think what you're talking to there is like, it's shareholder focused, not stakeholder focused.
Yeah.
I think the one way that we can really get into is, I'm finding even in my own work, I'm not sure if you've noticed the same for yourself. We've all heard this word mindfulness that gets thrown around, but to me, mindfulness is super powerful, especially in IFS work, because it is about, I need to calm. I need to come into the present moment in order to even explore my system.
Yeah.
And so I think perhaps that's an opportunity for those organizations that are at least embracing mindfulness, because if we can get them to be able to calm and be present in the moment, the next step might be, let's explore what's here in this moment.
Okay.
Fingers
That's good.
crossed, right?
DISC, mindfulness. It's all good. So how or where can people get in touch with you, learn more about you, what you do, and how you can work with them?
Yeah, they can visit our website, at www.moltocrescendo.com. And as well as they can hook up on LinkedIn, they can link in with me, and feel free to start a conversation that way. And we can carry on a discovery conversation from there.
Awesome. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today, Thom.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure. I'm so passionate about this. And so I'd love any opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah, it's been great. Thanks, and have a great weekend.
And you as well. Thank you.
Bye. There you have it. Episode 27 is in the books. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I want to tell folks that you can get the book No Bad Parts by Richard Schwartz. I got my copy from the library. I actually got it from the library's online copy. I got an e-copy from the library and read No Bad Parts. It's really fantastic, going through, spelling out this philosophy, the background behind the work of IFS, and gives you some tools for how to navigate. I also want to say that one of the best ways to use this work is to just make a change in language when you're confronting someone, or maybe even you're dealing with something negative going on in yourself. You're kind of in a negative self-talk spinny thing in your brain. You can create some distance by just calling this thing out. So if you are having kind of a confrontational experience with someone, just saying something like, I'm noticing that there's a part of you that, and then you describe whatever like behavior or reaction that you're seeing in the other person. When you say it's a part of them, you're clearly outlining that it's not all of them, that you don't think that they are a terrible person, but that you're noticing that this thing is happening, that there's a part of them that does this. And you know that there are lots of other parts of them that do wonderful things or neutral things. And it can also be really good for yourself. So if you're speaking to someone, maybe you're trying to explain something, explain behavior, Not so much like in an excuse or a defensive way, but you're just trying to create some distance. You can say there's a part of me that, and that can be really helpful for the other person to hear you better. And there's also this phenomena when you're in the negative self-talk and you're just having like an argument or a bad time with yourself. And you can just understand that there's a part of you that is going down a rabbit hole. And it just creates a little bit of distance. It changes like the whole scope and feeling around something that might not be supporting you at that particular moment in the best possible way. Maybe you can learn that that thing is trying to support you, but the consequence isn't so great. Anyway, I find the work really, really fascinating, and I hope you did too. As always, I hope that you are doing well in your work and in your life, and that you're seeking to uplevel the experience for humans in your environment. And you're doing this by shoring yourself up and living into your values with integrity, even when things feel like a shit show. As always, please send any comments or messages my way. You can send me a note or recorded message at linda@workdopepod.com. That's linda@workdopepod.com. Until next time, which won't be that far from now, it's Linda Stacy signing off for Work Dope. Bye-bye.